Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Quixotic Topic. I'm your host, Daquan, and today I'm joined by
Adam.
and
Harold.
and today we're going to be talking about technology. And so, Adam, when you came to me and said that you want to talk about technology, was there anything in specific that you were referring to, or?
So the first thing that pops to my mind when I think of technology is probably like cell phone technology and wearable technology that we bring around with us every day.
Mhm.
It's just kind of fascinating how everyone has access to all this technology now.
Right, right.
You go back 10 years, people couldn't have dreamed of having a computer in their pocket.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, even with the first few iPhones, they were sluggish, but now everyone thinks it's second nature to pull out their phone and do tasks that couldn't have been imaginable.
Yeah.
That just kind of fascinates me, and I thought that'd be a good topic to kind of
Yeah, yeah,
touch on.
definitely. One thing that I do notice is that with the surplus of technology that's around us, is that we kind of rely on it. I would say in some cases a bit too much. For example, like given the fact that all information that you could ever want is on Google, you never really need to know anything. It kind of circumvents a lot of common educational practices, especially in terms of remembrance, especially seeing as that it's stored on a tablet for you. And so I think that technology in some cases can be kind of a crutch that can lead to some unfortunate happenstances. What do you think, Harold?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think in the terms of like it being a crutch, like, the most obvious thing is like the calculators for me. Like,
Calculators,
now
yes.
calculators, like, I don't know, this school doesn't really use them, but the TI
School being the
Inspires,
School
or
of
like
Science and
the
Math.
School of Science and Math, yeah, well, really any school. But the TI Inspires actually, like, most people don't know about it. They'll do most of your like math 1, math 2, math 3 for you. Like, you really don't even have to like have those classes learned. Like,
Yeah, definitely.
I think I might have done like two math problems on like a SAT test just like by myself just because those calculators I mean they get it done for you. Like
Right, right.
before when researching papers you'd have to go to the library, look through newspapers, stuff like that. Now you just look up scholarly articles and you have access to millions just in your hand basically. So
Yeah.
for sure
It's
it's a little bit of a crutch.
yeah, it's definitely like a lot of power to wield in the sense that like oh, that's another thing is that this technology is being pushed to younger and younger audiences. For example, just the other day, I saw a 7-year-old with an Apple Watch. I was like, huh. And it's interesting that like I had to stop and think about that because I mean, technology is open to everyone to use, so that's pretty fair. But it's interesting to see how technology is starting to affect younger people. Another example of this is like children who have these sort of digital pacifiers now in the form of like an iPad with Fruit Ninja on it.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've noticed. I mean, younger and younger kids are having access to cell phones, and it's a big responsibility giving them access to the worldwide internet. I mean, that's a lot of information that they have access to, and I think that exposing children to such information at a young age can really hinder their future ability to like even like focus because constantly being exposed to I guess high levels of dopamine and high response times in like a phone,
Yeah,
you
like
come to you come to expect that
right,
from everything.
procedurally reducing the attention spans.
Yeah, and so you come to expect things happen just like that all the time, like it does on the internet.
Right, and then you
And
start raising brats.
yeah, and I mean, the younger you get it, I mean, I feel I've seen people as young as in like first grade with like an iPhone.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind. I mean, I had a flip phone up until
Oh
like
yeah,
middle school.
definitely. I
Like,
feel like everyone in the Gen Z, is that us? I think I'm pretty sure that's us.
Yeah.
yeah,
We all had like we had to start with the like BlackBerry as like a screen and a keyboard, and then maybe like once middle school started, then we got to have like the big full touch screen. But
Bro, every phone I've had I've worked for. I've bought with my own money every single phone.
what did you do? Like where'd you get the money from?
Um Classified?
Classified. Okay, so we have a vagabond here.
But what's that?
Pretty much someone just a criminal.
Oh,
Yeah.
uh, not me, but whoever employed me at a rather young age, probably.
No, yeah. So when you were employed at a rather young age, were you privy to technology? Like, did you have to use an iPad to organize where you would do your crime?
No, man, I just got out of bed at 7, went to work, and came back and got paid. Like back then, I say like the first time I worked would have been probably been like 6th or 7th grade. I think I might have either had like, I think I had one of those flip phones with the like, you could either type on the front screen and like pop it open and you got the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of those until like 7th grade. That's when I got my first iPhone.
That you worked for.
That I worked for.
Legally.
Legally, yeah.
Yeah, we say that in air quotes.
Yeah. Legally.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, how you were able to just kind of find. Well, I don't know. Did you go out of your way to find that illegal avenue of work?
No.
Okay.
Like,
so just kind of opened up for you.
Yeah.
It was just there. It's just like.
It's yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really dangerous, actually, because that job could have been like really anything, and it also could have not been a job as well. I mean, a lot of people use like notice that in big cities that people will have like signs up where it's like work for cash, and it's just like a phone number, and
Oh
you
no,
call
no,
it.
like I actually like they're like related to me.
Okay.
So I wasn't
okay.
like. Now, granted, the job was very dangerous, and I don't think you can actually work that job till you're like either 18 or 21. But yeah, I got paid by the hour, so I'll
And
take
it makes sense. I mean, like, kind of at a young age, like, people in your family tend to employ, like, whether it's, like, a family business or, like, a family farm or something like that. Hey, it's hard work, but I will say those kind of jobs do kind of instill work ethic. And
Yeah,
so,
that's
like,
for sure.
and, like, when you lose that degree of work ethic if you're just given things, and, like, definitely younger and younger kids are getting just given these phones, and some kids come to expect it now, that they have their phone. Like, my little brother, my parents were adamant about holding off.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, even still, he was very persistent about getting a phone for so long. It's just because everyone in his grade had a phone.
There's
and
like that peer pressure.
Yeah, and he was in the 4th grade begging
That's
for,
crazy.
like, begging for an iPhone. And, like, there are kids in his class that had way better cell phones than, like, anyone in my family.
Yeah.
And that just blew me away that little kids are given access to these phones. And I guess my parents finally cracked down to the pressure because, and it's just, I think it's a help. Like, definitely it's nice having access to all this technology, but especially little kids being exposed to stuff like social media. Like, just recently, you read
social
articles
media.
all the time on how social media will just break down just children at a very young age who just, whether it's like body image or not being able to meet expectations of like some extremely athletic kid or something like
or
that.
like
It's
not
just-
getting enough likes on your post.
yeah, it's just it's a little
It's a big
ridiculous.
heap of anxiety in social media.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, social media is great. Like,
Mhm.
I definitely enjoy using it as a means of keeping up with some old friends. I've moved around a few times, and I think Harold's mentioned that he's moved around quite often too.
He
Where,
does not.
well, he's mentioned to me personally,
Okay.
but yeah, so I've moved around a few times, and each time you kind of build your own friend group and move away. But it's nice to keep in touch. So
Yeah, definitely.
if I compare that to like my dad's generation, right? He had a lot of good friends. He was he was a Navy kid, so he was always moving around. He lived in Guantanamo Bay, Naples, all that such. So he made friends in every little spot, and he made really good friends in Virginia Beach.
Mhm.
And he still keeps in touch with those really good friends, but they weren't able to keep in touch as much. You had the phone, right? You could call
Right.
every once in a while and stuff. But now, it's nice being able to like see what your friend is up to and like message them just like that,
definitely.
easy.
Just send them a quick ping. Another thing about children having earlier access to technology, I feel, is that on the offhand, like I guess this might be a pro to it, is that since all of these, we have like young people being introduced to what technology is at such a young age that like as they grow, like they'll be growing with that technology to be able to produce more technology per se. That goes into like manufacturing a workforce, but it's interesting to see that like the kids that have like iPhone X's today in like the 3rd grade will may or may not, because of the fact that they were introduced to the iPhone X, would be creating the iPhone 2X like a decade from now. Like, well, to be fair, we don't really know, but it is something that could happen. And so like giving kids technology isn't like, I wouldn't say an ultimately bad thing that shouldn't be done, but it's definitely be taken with caution. But honestly, like raising a kid, that is just a lot of caution, pretty much, because it's like you can't shelter them too much, or else relatively bad things will happen. You can't not shelter them at all, or else other relatively bad things will happen. You have
It's
to,
a fine balance.
yeah, you have to strike a balance. One thing my parents told me, I don't know if this is just an excuse, but they say that no parent ever really gets it right, which it's hard to, given that we're human and we're prone to making mistakes. We're not technology. Speaking of, you guys know how there's, for example, on every single box, there's like nutrition labels and whatnot.
Yeah.
And like, there's tons and libraries worth of books on like how to raise a child.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, this is more of a hypothetical, if we had a child, like, as soon as they were born, and were raised, like, to the T on every single, like, nutritional and psychological guideline, like, what would happen? Like, if that baby was only fed, like, the exact amount of, calories, I guess, or, salt, phosphorus, other such chemicals that a baby needs, and, was given like just enough, or at least just enough scientifically prescribed tender loving care, I would wonder how that child would like grow.
Would that be an ideal child, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, definitely. Harold, what do you think?
I mean, I honestly think that part of growing is that like you're not perfect. That like you have to deal with things like getting bullied in school, or like having to make friends like in different places, stuff like that. Like, I feel like if you grew up in an ideal situation, maybe the outside world views you as perfect, but you would never be able to like get along in the real world with like people, just everyone basically. Like, you would be so sheltered. Like, yeah, you might be perfect psychologically. You might be
Extremely
smarter than most people on the street. You might be like
not your average
perfect,
Joe.
yeah, healthy, just as fit as possible. But I don't think they'd be ready for society.
Ready for okay, cool. So like, I guess that kind of is a bit unethical, I think, but kind of a lab rat per se.
Yeah.
Just kind of there. And so then like as soon as you release them, it's like, I wonder, so given that humans are just naturally prone to making mistakes, would it even be possible to raise an ideal child?
I don't think there's such thing as an ideal child.
Well, yeah.
And like, I just think that humans grow through adversity, and but exposure to adversity grows a child's character, I would say. I guess like children are exposed to awful things, and like some more than others, and it's just a part of where you were raised and stuff. And it's harsh, but I think children can really grow through that. And I don't know, like growing as a child is very important. You are exposed a lot as a child. I can't remember what kind of article it was, but it was like your formative years, like before like 8 years old or something, will determine the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like your personality and that kind of stuff. Because that's your background, right? And so what do you have if you're sheltered the whole time?
Right, exactly. And so, like, I guess you're saying that while you would be able to, well, okay, still on the hypothetical, while you would be able to manufacture an ideal child, you wouldn't be able to manufacture an ideal person.
Yes.
Yeah. Because, like, that person has something that child, well, there's still people, but, like, that person would have something that the perfect person, in air quotes, wouldn't have. That being a personality.
And this kind of moves us into the discussion of eugenics and genetic engineering and such, where you want to give the best life for the child as possible. And so, but how ethical is it to, I don't know, if they say we're born with a genetic disorder, or like we're in the womb and it was discovered that this fetus had a genetic disorder that when born might affect their life. Is it ethical for you to go in and change that gene so that that child lives a different life? So like, would you love that child any less, right? And that's a big
That's a
thing.
a really hard question.
It's a very hard question.
Harold, what do you think? How would you, if you were given the chance to genetically modify a baby so that they wouldn't have a certain birth defect, would you do it?
Well, like, what sort of birth defect are we talking about? Because there's like,
Pick and choose.
there's things that like,
Where do you draw that line?
Yeah.
Where do
What
I
is
draw
a
the
birth
line?
defect?
So I was I think last year I was in a biology class where we talked about like how most kids get tested, like really like as soon as they know they're conceived, just to figure out like do they have a disease, especially if their parents are at risk for something, because you can test compatibility,
Mhm.
and especially if the parents are older, then the chance of genetic diseases gets worse. And like what they do is if like let's say your child has Down syndrome, then like they tell you that, but most of the time it's fine. Like you keep the child. Obviously, we can't genetically alter them now, but there's other things that are like far worse that would just stop them from being able to like get any drama in their life. Like their life would just be constantly in pain. I forgot what it was called. Like my professor told me, but it just like left me. So I think if they're still able to enjoy their life and have fun, then I think you would leave it. But if you're given the ability to change it and it's for the child's like it's better for the child, I would think I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, but it's also like, where do you draw that line?
Yeah.
And so it also opens up a moral precedent for
Like, do
What-
you
what-
have the right to change that?
what else can we change
Yeah.
too? Because that power given in the wrong hands.
Then you get anime cat girls.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but we say that jokingly. But yeah,
That's
a
definitely
parent
something
might
that we
build a child around what they view as an ideal.
right,
kid.
exactly. And I mean, we've seen before with the whole blonde hair, blue eyes thing that doesn't really go down well when trying to matriculate.
Meticulously.
Wow. Oh man. Matriculate. That's the word. Matriculate back into society. It doesn't really end well. Granted that the Aryan race thing was under different circumstances, but still, if everyone was given the opportunity with just enough money to produce what they saw a designer kid, then what would the next generation look like? Like, would we have? I mean, we could go like comic book with it, and we could have kids with like red skin or like golden eyes or whatnot. But like also we could have like, oh yeah, I feel that a perfect child does not have this skin color, and then that's a problem. So
Yeah. Honestly, for me, when it comes to stuff like that, I just think like humans should stay out of it. Like altering humans in that way is just completely unethical. Like, would giving every single child like ridiculous like make them all geniuses like better than the human race? Probably, but like
is it worth
not.
it?
Yeah, it's not worth
Because,
it.
I mean-
It just yeah.
Yeah, because like if we produce a bunch of genius children, then that might
Then
make
no
us.
one's a genius.
Yeah, and then we might like progress towards the singularity faster. The singularity being a event in which an AI becomes omniscient and rules the world. Terminator, basically Terminator. And I mean, that's not really something I don't want to go through personally. I don't really. I mean, that's very dystopian. But yeah, and then especially like if we created a generation of geniuses, then like I feel that would also ostracize all of the past generations who are like not geniuses. It's like there would be a disconnect in communications because like all of the really smart kids would be like, oh yeah, I just got out of my quantum mechanics class, and it's like a second grader, and then meanwhile you have professors who are like still studying quantum mechanics. It's like, well, how do you mesh that?
Because you have
You
that
don't.
rift of divide,
Right.
Of transition.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we should just probably stay out of stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the anime cat girl thing, that would be cool. Admittedly, but it's still like definitely very
And how would the child feel?
oh
If he-
yeah,
if-
of course,
if
right,
they
right.
knew that they were modified, they were changed, they weren't deemed as good enough, and so they were changed.
Yeah, like just
What
like
kind of mental impact would that have on a child? I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like it leads to a lot of almost like an existential crisis where
yeah,
I'm not enough,
right.
or if
I wasn't enough.
yeah, so I was changed,
Yeah.
and so I think that's just too touchy of a subject for just in general for humans to be involved in.
Yeah. But to be fair, gene editing has well, not gene editing, but just research in genes have done a lot of good for the human race, specifically the Human Genome Project.
Yeah.
I mean, that was I think we can all say that was a good thing. The fact that we know that. But yeah, it's interesting to see how despite science existing for what, like a millennia by now, very long time, like an epoch maybe. No, not epoch, that's too long. But the
A
fact
while.
a while, good while, couple years, maybe like a century or two. But the fact that science still hasn't reached a a limit where we can say that science has gone too far. To be fair though, that line is drawn like honestly into sand, and it's changing a lot of times because like I remember when there was talk about having like I think it was a SIM card like in your hand. People were talking about, oh, science too far. Nope, nope, bad science.
But now you have ideas like Elon Musk's. I can't remember what it was called, but
Elon Musk does a lot of things.
yeah, a chip implant in your head,
Mhm.
where you'd be able to control things with a chip in your head.
Right, right.
Some people might deem that as the
Too far.
future.
Nope.
Yeah, some people might think that as the future, but some might think of it as too far. Or, and I also think it's a generational divide too. And like we think that our older generations today are like so out of the loop, but
Yeah, like stuck in the past.
that might be us. That
Yeah.
will be us, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there is a lot to learn from the older generation too, where you get a unique perspective before
Yeah.
a certain era. So,
Right.
like, in essence of technology, back when our grandparents, per se, were growing up, they didn't have access to all this information, all this technology.
And
right?
they had
There
to like do 5 mile hikes in order to get to school every morning.
weren't- I remember when this movie was a nickel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's just it sounds cliche, but
Soda pop was 100% sugar and water.
yeah, it seems so cliche, but
Yeah,
that might be us.
definitely. It's like I remember when you could only connect to 13 devices via Bluetooth. Now you can connect to 256. Yeah. It's interesting to see how technology is like its exponentiality has made it so that tech is more fitted for younger generations. I mean, like every now and then you'll have like a development like prosthetics, for example, that will reach back into a will reach back to help those who have like lost their legs in wars, for example. But most of the time, for example, like when dark mode came out with iOS 13 for Apple devices, that was mainly for the people who had Apple devices, and that just happens to be like our generation, like maybe a couple of millennials.
Yeah, and another thing that's interesting to see, you mentioned Apple.
Oh yes, Apple.
Yes, Apple. I personally enjoy Apple products,
Oh
but
my.
so it's the majority in America where there was a survey done, like 80% of U.S. teens prefer iPhone over Android, or like, and there's almost a stigma around owning an Android, and especially in the U.S.
For no reason.
Yeah, the whole green bubble issue, right?
Yeah,
Where Androids have a different texting service.
It's different because it's bad.
Yeah, but it's funny because that's the perspective that we get in America, but looking overseas, it's completely different.
Right, right.
But yeah, so like overseas, you've got companies like Huawei. That's a big hitter now, where the question of espionage, really.
Yeah.
So that's stigmatized in America, but it's commonplace in China.
Yeah, definitely. And so, going back to the Apple versus Android thing, I'm assuming that you are firmly in the Apple camp.
I am firmly in the Apple camp. I am a firm believer in the Apple ecosystem.
Okay, Harold, you?
Yeah,
Okay, well,
Apple all the way.
as the only Android stan in this room, I'd have to say, while I respect what Apple has done, I still feel that Androids are equal, if not superior.
Oh.
Given the fact that we do make your batteries.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's been a lot of innovation on both ends, right?
Yeah.
You've got Apple, who kind of ushered in this new era of the iPhone, the portable technological touchscreen device. And like you've gotten strides each side. So like Androids tended to push the way into larger smartphones, things like that. Apple has the Apple is more of a driver in consumers don't know what they want until they've been shown, right? And so it's what's pushed a lot of innovation in the company. Like Steve Jobs was he was a very interesting mind. He was notoriously hard to work for. He was a strange man.
Eccentric.
Yes, but the technological innovations that he has made have made a extreme impact on society. So like, how do you even come up with something like the iPhone? Right? Like, how do you come up with something like the AirPod? How do you come up with something like the watch?
I don't think Steve Jobs made the AirPod.
Well,
Okay, well, yeah, but I'm
he
just
got
saying,
the ball rolling.
Yeah, in general, with the idea of just consumers don't know what they want until they've been shown it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really dangerous thing in terms of like advertising, because that's somewhat predatory when you think about it. It's like, hey, we're gonna create a want that seems like a need, and because of like, you know what I'm saying, like, given that no one really thought they needed an iPhone until the iPhone existed, like, goes to show how good Apple is at advertising and making people think that Apple is superior.
Yeah, I've definitely fell into that trap.
Yeah.
Apple's capable of captivating audiences.
Yeah,
Their
definitely.
keynotes are very notorious for being memorable. Like for instance, at the end of Apple keynotes, Apple has a notorious line, "Oh, and one more thing,"
Yeah.
where they introduce usually something revolutionary. So
Right,
they use that phrase for the introduction.
Revolutionary.
So
air
like, though
quotes.
it's some things are genuinely revolutionary from Apple.
That's
Like,
true. That's
they,
true.
They use that for the introduction of the iPhone, the introduction of the iPad, and those products are very prevalent today. They're all over the place. Now Apple, I feel, kind of milks the idea of innovation.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? You can't rip on them for what they've done.
Yeah.
They've really completely changed the technology industry, and it reflects that. They're the world's most valuable company.
That's fair. That's fair. Harold, how do you feel about the predatory advertising of Apple, in the sense that they have kind of manufactured a name for themselves, and that has, in a way, kind of propelled them to where they are now?
Well, I don't really know that. I don't really think that Apple's like advertising is predatory. Like, so what I mean by that is like, most people want to buy an iPhone, but that's pretty much because everyone else has an iPhone, and like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot more simple to use. Like, I know for me, like, I barely like I get my iPhone, I get on Snapchat, Instagram, like, I don't get on much else, honestly. Like,
Okay.
the camera's nice. It's just that it's so much more like simplistic and compatible with many things. So like, that's why I have one, and I just like the look.
All right.
Like,
Well, I
and
mean,
like, they did invent a few things. Like, the iPhone was really revolutionary. Like, Steve Jobs was, yeah, like Adam said, he was a creative man. Like, I read his whole like biography, where there's a story when he was like in like either middle or high school, where he set up a ticking timer in his locker, and his principal thought it was a bomb. And his principal grabbed the bomb and ran it into the middle of the football field just to figure out it was like a ticking timer, and then he got suspended for like a few weeks or something like that. Like, he was a very weird guy. Like, so
Interesting man. Man.
I feel that Harold, one point that you said that was really interesting was that one of the main reasons you had a iPhone was its like ease of access,
Mhm.
and also that everyone else had it, and also that you already have stuff that's compatible with it. And so that's like kind of what I'm getting at when I say that, like, predatory advertising, because of the fact that the reason, like, Apple has they have that degree of separation in terms of advertising. In fact, that they're not really doing it. It's the other people that have Apple devices that are doing it. It's like, hey, like, we all have this.
It's a mind share.
Yeah, yeah.
Mind share. And like, it's interesting that I mentioned earlier about how the Apple is just a strong grip on the U.S. You go somewhere like South Korea and Samsung. Samsung's a South Korean company.
And to
And
be
so-
fair, Samsung's probably done the same thing there. So
Oh yeah, no, it's just like you ask someone in South Korea, they'll say that Samsungs tend to be easier to use overseas. There might be, but more places that accept Samsung Pay rather than Apple Pay or something like that overseas, or I don't know, things of that nature, where Samsung is built for their home market, Apple is built for their home market, and perception changes too overseas, where not as many teens might have an iPhone over there,
Right.
and it's not as much of a mind share over there. It's a strict decision of which one I think is better. Not
Right, definitely.
What phone does everyone have so I can look cool and fit in.
it's more about like spec analysis in terms of
Yeah.
like, what can this phone do and what do I need it to do. And so Harold, I have a another hypothetical for you.
Hmm.
Given that technology is being presented to younger and younger audiences, and technology is also being presented to more and more audiences, do you feel that it will be worth it for, this is somewhat similar to like a universal income, but do you feel that technology in terms of like, let's just start with phones, be like public access, like everyone should have a phone, or specifically like an iPhone or a Samsung?
Well, I don't know about something like an iPhone or a Samsung because when you really think about it, you don't need an iPhone or a Samsung. Now, whether you say like, would everyone like have to have like say like a basic flip phone that you can contact people in emergencies for? Sure, I'd be down with that. Like, give everyone the ability to like, oh, I'm in an emergency. Like, I have, at the very least, some backup to get me out of this. But
I think the market's already saturated, and in a sense of access to the internet, the government has kind of already filled that role as far as like public internet access and computers at like, I don't know, a library or something. Um, so I guess that's kind of like the standard, at least in the United States, where you at the very least can have access to the internet through a public means at like the library or something.
Yeah.
But like I guess going forward, trying to give everyone an iPhone, I mean, I by no means thinks that's necessary.
Yeah.
And like a lot of times people prioritize their phone as far as like a purchase that needs to happen every few years. When in reality, if you don't have the means to buy a new cell phone every year,
Don't buy a new cell phone.
don't
Yeah.
buy a new
Be
cell phone.
smart with your money.
Be smart with your money. And people are prioritizing their cell phones as a need, where they're in situations where they just can't. They realistically can't spend $1,000 on a phone.
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing, is that like the phone being $1,000 in the first place. It's like that's. I feel that that's somewhat egregious.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. But Apple's good at helping their market.
Advertising.
They know how to. If anyone could charge $1,000 for a phone, it would be Apple.
That's fair.
And they're really the one who broke into that supposedly niche market where they made the iPhone 10, iPhone X. They're one of their most profitable cell phones, right? They normalized $1,000 price tag, and that kind of brought the level up for all other manufacturers. If Apple can charge 1,000, why can't we?
Yeah. Which goes back to the fact that there's no ethical means of consumption under capitalism. Going back to the whole public forms of accessing the internet and accessing technology, I feel that there might not be enough of that in America, because like there are libraries, like those do exist, but when was the last time, not at school, did you hear about the library doing something? I mean, granted, I come from Charlotte, shout out, and like their library system is amazing. It's great. Like you can feel their presence. But like when I go to another state or another county, and like I like look around, I can never really find anything out like about their libraries. Like it's so incredibly like low key, I guess. And
People forget they exist.
yeah, people forget they exist, and that's like honestly really unfortunate, because like the people who need like to use the library for something, they're not going to get that word of mouth. Like it's harder for them to find, like if they don't know that a library exists, how are they supposed to use it?
Or people have this misconception or I guess idea in their head that the library is an old and dead place where you just can't do anything. But like in reality,
You just so much
if you haven't been to a library within the past few years, I mean, it's a reasonable place to get work done, free Wi-Fi, like reasonable computers.
Yeah,
It's a good tool that more people should be aware of that they can use.
definitely. This is PSA from the Quixotic Topic. Go to your local library. There'll probably be something interesting there for you. Harold, how do you feel about libraries?
well, I think libraries is sort of one of those things that not many people use them anymore. And like you do have to kind of go out of your way to find them now. And I haven't, like me personally, I think the last time I went to a library was to get the library card so I could go on my computer and search up stuff using the library like search thing.
Huh, that's interesting.
Because I needed to like some biology project. I needed like sources and I couldn't Like just using books would have just taken entirely too long.
Yeah, so like the library
Like,
was pretty much your last ditch.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And also like I think a lot of the reason that is they've like kind of like originally you'd have to go there to like get your books, get your knowledge, but now I can buy any pretty much any book I want just off the internet. Like
Hmm.
I say that, but like I don't know, like very historical texts that like maybe only like a few libraries have might not be on there. But I think at this point it'd be reasonable to say that most books are just like a couple clicks away. So
Hmm.
and also like you could find more books online than probably any library would have, just because it's not possible for any library to have every single book that's ever existed.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because that's kind of what Amazon birthed out of, right? The idea
Amazon.
of a cohesive place where you can have access to
Everything.
millions and millions of books initially, but it's grown to everything. And you have this effect where Amazon is just putting retail out of business, and
Right.
it makes you wonder what happens. What
So-
happens when there
You
are
can-
no more retail competitors?
Yeah, you
What-
can effectively not have to leave the house ever.
Yeah, and like what power does that give Amazon where if there's no other competition or no other means of breaking into a market of a vast global structure like Amazon that's able to ship things to you within a day
Yeah,
for free?
right.
It just blows my mind that they can do that. But like once that system's in place and once retail's gone, what do? You
Yeah.
can't turn to another company if Amazon's like the
Right.
It's a monopoly, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel that just the nature of technological improvement, like that exponential scale, is inherently monopolistic, because like once you have a hold of like your niche, you can essentially exploit it, and that's what a lot of tech companies are doing, especially with like inflating phones to cost $1,000 or basically making it so that it's essentially your one place for your one-stop shop, literally. Um, Gone now are the younger days of mom and pop startups. I think that it's a hard question to answer because like it involves trying to predict the future, and of course there's people that are trained to do that, at least with the best of their ability. But even then, most of the time their perspectives or projections are fairly grim.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the public idea now, where there's almost like this sense of hopelessness
Mhm.
against Amazon, right? You've got people who are trying to compete, obviously.
Right.
And like then again, there are competitors worldwide. So Amazon's got a hold of the U.S. market, a good chunk of the European market. Rakuten is the Japanese equivalent of Amazon that kind of has a stranglehold in the Japanese market. But it just makes you wonder, you know, it's a big convenience though.
Mhm.
Definitely Amazon's a nice tool where it is a one-stop shop, and I'm definitely a heavy user of Amazon. It's
Mhm.
nice having stuff right at your doorstep, but it almost kind of makes you lazy too.
Yeah,
If you can have something in your doorstep within a day, or with Prime now, their 2-hour shipping service within an hour or two. Why leave my house?
yeah. It's interesting that like you can sit on your bed like eating chips like and to order exercise equipment and then continue to eat your chips and then later that day you'll have it. It's fairly paradoxical what you can do with this technology. And going back to like the whole like singularity thing, based off of how monopolistic the nature of technology is, it's not hard to see it as a wholly bad thing. And another layer of perspective on this is like how Amazon is treating the people that work for it, because there's been many articles that came out. I know this because of the technology that I used. About Amazon like mistreating their workers in terms of like the people who are getting those boxes to you and within like one day and whatnot are like under extremely stressful working conditions that honestly no one should really be submitted to. In that sense, there's been a lot of boycotts that came just to stop Amazon's malpractice of how they treat their not consumers, but workers.
Yeah, I just read an article about Amazon's been in a time crunch to remain competitive, I guess, and kind of squash the competition where they can go from free 2-day shipping to free 1-day shipping anywhere in the U.S.
Mhm.
So if you just think about that logistically, trying to get packages shipped from one end of the country to the other within one day. It just blows your mind, but you have to wonder what kind of conditions workers are being submitted to reach that goal.
Yeah.
And so, like, you read articles about these Amazon workers that basically they have these wrist trackers on.
Right.
And if they're not in constant motion, they dock that time against themselves.
Yeah.
And they can't have more than a certain amount of idle time a day outside of their break. And if they do, that's a point on them.
Right.
And too many points, they're fired. That's a very stressful working environment.
Definitely.
And Amazon is a good proponent of, I guess, raising wages and stuff. I mean, they pay their workers $15 an hour.
Yeah, and then like take that and then compare it to what is essentially a shackle. It's like, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
I've heard like terrible stories about like Amazon, like at their like warehouses or whatever. Like, this is the same professor I was talking about earlier. She said that she had a friend that worked for Amazon, and they would literally like pay them like they got paid reasonably well for like they get paid better than minimum wage.
Okay.
So, but the thing is, like, yeah, like you have to constantly be doing stuff, and you have to work crazy weird hours, and like they won't even give you something as simple as like a bathroom break. Like, they're like, go like pee in a bottle. Like, you don't have time to like go do something. Or else it messes up the rhythm or whatever.
There's a set amount of time that they have to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're gone outside of that bathroom time, that docks you against your idle time. And if you're not constantly moving, you're out.
Right.
And it kind of pushes these tech companies towards automation.
Yeah.
Right. I just recently did some research on the effects of automation. You know, what kind of things companies are doing for automation. And right now we stand at this weird point where automation is it's most definitely taking jobs.
Right, it's
but
taking jobs.
You're in this weird middle area where
it's like the jobs that people have for tech companies are like not good in terms of stress. It's like there's money there, but there's also a lot of stress, and so companies try and circumvent that by automation. But the more they automate, then the less jobs there are, and so now there's more people looking for jobs, and it's like it's a unbalanced teeter-totter.
Yeah, you're in this weird middle area where they have to kind of coincide with each other, and automation. I mean, it's definitely projected to take away jobs. But if you take a look in the case of like Tesla's had a lot of issues automating because like the technology might not quite be there. They had a ton of delays with their Model 3 production just because of their automation. Their assembly line was completely automated, which is nice, but if one thing goes wrong on that automation line, you can't swap out a worker. You can't swap out a worker who knows how to do it. You have to swap out a whole machine.
Mm-hmm.
And also Tesla, I think one thing with that is that like it's such a new company, it doesn't have like the experience of, let's say, Ford, like how to design cars and stuff. Like, I've heard stuff like Tesla has like 3 times more parts to a car than a Ford does.
Oh, it's more than that. The the body frame has 10 times the amount of parts as a Ford body frame.
Yeah, and like the whole idea of electricity is like, I think it should honestly be simpler, because with the engine you have to deal with, you know, pistons. You have to, like, an engine is literally just a bunch of explosions that drives your car. So you'd think that would take more than electricity, but like with Tesla and their very complicated design, like, make stuff like that a lot harder than it should be.
Yeah, but I mean Tesla cars are nice. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
They've got that same Apple, I guess, nuance to them where it's a very
it's different, and so it's
good.
Different.
Yeah, they're seen as like the innovator, and like Tesla does a very good job at what they do. Their cars are they make nice cars, and so it's just it was been stated that if a company like Ford or GM had the Tesla design, it would absolutely squash all their competition. But it's just the fact that Tesla's still a small, very somewhat ill-managed company.
Ill-managed.
and that's just because of it's a new company, right? You don't have 100 years of experience as like these automotive giants. Not to mention lobbyists in Washington who push against this kind of push because where's the money at right now? The large automotive companies, not Tesla.
Right. So maybe what we need is to get more children in cars so that like they'll grow up being used to them, and then they'll produce better cars.
Tying it all back together.
Yeah, and with that, we're approaching the 45-minute mark, and so if you guys have any closing remarks.
I mean, I had a good time. I liked it.
You guys were great.
Many different things. about politics. We talked about many different topics.
Mm-hmm.
Had a good time.
Fairly quixotic.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Getting this experience was, I don't know, it was good to just kind of chat.
Yeah, totally. It's what people need. Anyway, I'm Daquan. This was the Quixotic Topic. See you next time.